The steady pitter-patter of rain against the windows of my antique shop was starting to feel like a metaphor for my life, a constant dreary backdrop to my mounting financial troubles. I'm Eloise Parker, 38 years old, and I've spent the better part of my adult life curating vintage treasures in this cozy corner of Portland. But lately, it felt like the world had forgotten about the charm of the past. I sighed, running my fingers through my brunette hair, my green eyes scanning the ledger before me. The numbers weren't adding up, no matter how I tried to spin it. The thought of closing shop made my stomach churn. This place wasn't just a business, it was my sanctuary, my connection to a world that seemed to be fading away faster than I could grab onto it. Desperate for a change of scenery and maybe a stroke of luck, I decided to head out to the annual Vintage Vinyl Festival. If nothing else, I could lose myself in the melodic crackle of classic jazz for a few hours. The festival was a riot of color and sound, a stark contrast to the gray skies above. Vinyl enthusiasts from all walks of life milled about, their eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. I felt a spark of hope ignite in my chest. Maybe this was exactly what I needed to reignite my passion. As I made my way through the crowd, balancing a steaming cup of coffee, my attention was caught by a rare first pressing of a Billie Holiday album. In my excitement, I failed to notice the woman who had stepped into my path. "Oh shit," I exclaimed as my coffee collided with her pristine white designer coat, creating a Rorschach-like stain across the expensive fabric. "Gosh, I'm so sorry," I stammered, mortified by my clumsiness. To my surprise, instead of anger, I was met with a melodious laugh. "Well, I guess that's one way to make an impression," she said, her blue eyes twinkling with amusement. I found myself staring, taken aback by her beauty. Blonde hair framed a face that could have graced magazine covers, but it was her smile that truly captivated me. It was warm, genuine, and just a little bit mischievous. "I'm Sienna," she introduced herself, extending a hand that I shook perhaps a moment too long. "And you are?" "Eloise," I managed to reply, still flustered. "Eloise Parker. I own an antique shop downtown. Let me buy you a new coat, or at least get it cleaned." Sienna waved off my concerns. "Don't worry about it. I've been looking for an excuse to retire this one anyway." She glanced at the Billie Holiday record I'd been eyeing. "You've got good taste." And just like that, we fell into an easy conversation about jazz, vintage records, and the lost art of analog sound. Sienna's enthusiasm was infectious, her knowledge impressive. For the first time in months, I felt that spark of connection, that thrill of meeting someone who truly got it. As we wandered through the festival, our hands brushing occasionally, sending little jolts through my system, I couldn't help but feel like something significant was happening. The rain had stopped, and the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over everything. "You know," Sienna said, her voice taking on a softer tone, "I'd love to see your shop sometime. Maybe you could show me some of your favorite pieces?" I nodded, perhaps too eagerly. "I'd like that. How about tomorrow afternoon?" As we exchanged numbers, I felt a flutter in my chest that I hadn't experienced in years. Walking home that evening, the streets of Portland seemed brighter somehow, full of possibility. Little did I know that this chance encounter would set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the delicate balance between preserving the past and embracing the future. But in that moment, all I could think about was the way Sienna's eyes had lit up when she talked about music, and how I couldn't wait to see her again. The next morning, I woke up with a spring in my step, eagerly anticipating Sienna's visit to my shop. I spent the morning tidying up, making sure every antique gleamed under the soft lighting. As I was polishing an Art Deco mirror, my phone buzzed with a notification. Curious, I picked it up and nearly dropped it when I saw the headline, "Walsh Industries announces new CEO." My heart stopped. There, smiling confidently at the camera, was Angela. My Angela. Well, my ex-Angela to be precise. The woman who had broken my heart and left me questioning everything I thought I knew about love. And now, apparently, she was the new CEO of Walsh Industries, one of the biggest property development companies in Portland. I sat down heavily, my mind reeling. It had been years since I'd seen Angela, and now here she was, suddenly thrust back into my life in the most unexpected way. I couldn't help but wonder if this would complicate things. Portland wasn't that big a city after all. Before I could dwell on it further, the bell above the shop door chimed. I looked up to see Sienna walking in, her blonde hair catching the sunlight streaming through the windows. She looked even more beautiful than I remembered, dressed casually in jeans and a vintage band tee that hugged her curves in all the right places. "Wow," she breathed, taking in the shop. "This place is amazing, Eloise." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks at her praise. "Thanks. It's not much, but it's home." As I led Sienna around the shop, showing her my favorite pieces, I found myself captivated by her genuine interest and enthusiasm. She asked intelligent questions about the provenance of various items, her blue eyes sparkling with curiosity. We paused in front of a beautifully restored 1920 seconds gramophone. "This is stunning," Sienna said, running her fingers delicately over the brass horn. "It's one of my favorite pieces," I admitted. "There's something magical about the way it brings music to life." Sienna's eyes met mine, and suddenly the air between us felt charged. "Show me?" she asked softly. With slightly trembling hands, I set up the gramophone and placed a record on it. The rich, warm tones of Ella Fitzgerald filled the shop. Sienna closed her eyes, swaying gently to the music. When she opened them again, she was standing much closer to me. "Dance with me?" she whispered. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As we swayed together, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. The worries about my shop's finances, the shock of Angela's new position, all of it disappeared in the warmth of Sienna's arms. As the song came to an end, Sienna's gaze dropped to my lips. My heart raced as she leaned in, her breath warm against my skin. Our lips met in a soft, tentative kiss that quickly deepened, sending shivers down my spine. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Sienna smiled. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I met you." The next few weeks passed in a blissful haze. Sienna became a regular at the shop, sometimes bringing lunch, other times just sitting and chatting as I worked. She was like a breath of fresh air in my life, bringing light and laughter into places that had been dark for too long. But as much as I was enjoying my time with Sienna, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. She never talked about her family or her work, always deftly changing the subject when it came up. And then there was the Angela situation. I hadn't run into her yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. My suspicions were confirmed one rainy afternoon when Sienna rushed into the shop, looking flustered. "Eloise, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. Before she could continue, my phone rang. The caller ID made my blood run cold. Walsh Industries. "Hello?" I answered hesitantly. "Eloise, darling," Angela's familiar voice purred through the speaker. "It's been far too long. I have a business proposition for you. How would you like to evaluate the antique collection at Walsh Mansion?" I froze, my eyes darting to Sienna, who was watching me with a mix of curiosity and concern. How was I supposed to navigate this? I'll need to think about it," I managed to stammer out. "Of course, take your time," Angela replied smoothly. "But not too long. We have some exciting plans in the works, and I'd love for you to be a part of them." As I hung up, Sienna's expression had changed from concern to something I couldn't quite read. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. I took a deep breath. "That was Angela, the new CEO of Walsh Industries. She's my ex." Sienna's face paled. "Oh gosh," she whispered. "Eloise, there's something I need to tell you. My last name, it's Walsh. I'm Sienna Walsh." The room seemed to spin as the implications of her words sank in. Sienna was the heir to Walsh Industries, which meant Angela was now her. "She's my new boss," Sienna finished, confirming my unspoken thought. As we stood there, the rain pattering against the windows, I realized that the simple, beautiful connection we'd been building was about to become a lot more complicated. The past and present were colliding in ways I never could have imagined, and I had a feeling that our real challenges were only just beginning. The revelation that Sienna was a Walsh hit me like a ton of bricks. I stood there, my mind reeling, trying to process this new information. Sienna's eyes were wide with apprehension, waiting for my reaction. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Sienna ran a hand through her blonde hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of her nervousness. "I wanted you to know me, Eloise. Just me. Not the Walsh heiress, not the trust fund baby, just Sienna." I could understand that. I really could. But it didn't change the fact that our simple romance had just become incredibly complicated. "And Angela?" I pressed, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "Did you know about her?" Sienna shook her head vehemently. "Gosh, no. I had no idea she was your ex. I've been away from the family business for years, trying to find my own path. When I heard about the new CEO, I didn't even bother to look into it. I believed her. The genuine distress in her blue eyes was impossible to fake, but it didn't make our situation any less messy. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the chaos of my personal life. Sienna gave me space, but her absence felt like a physical ache. I missed her laugh, her enthusiasm, the way her eyes lit up when she discovered a new antique treasure. When Angela called again about the Walsh Mansion evaluation, I surprised myself by accepting. Maybe it was masochism, or maybe I just needed the money. Either way, I found myself standing in front of the imposing Walsh family estate a week later, my heart pounding in my chest. Angela greeted me at the door, looking as sleek and polished as ever in a tailored suit. Her smile was predatory, reminding me of why we'd broken up in the first place. "Eloise, darling," she purred, leaning in to air-kiss my cheeks. "So good to see you again." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the way my skin crawled at her touch. "Let's keep this professional, Angela," I said firmly. She laughed, a sound that used to make my heart race but now just set my teeth on edge. Of course, right this way." As we walked through the mansion, Angela filled me in on the Walsh family's plans. They wanted to convert several historic buildings in downtown Portland into modern office spaces. My job was to evaluate the antiques in the mansion, many of which would be sold to fund the project. I felt a pang in my chest at the thought of these beautiful pieces being scattered to the winds. "Some of these items are priceless," I argued. "They're part of Portland's history." Angela waved a dismissive hand. "History doesn't pay the bills, darling. Progress does." As we turned a corner, I nearly collided with Sienna. Her eyes widened in surprise, darting between Angela and me. "Eloise," she breathed. "I didn't know you'd be here today." Before I could respond, Angela stepped forward, her smile sharp. "Ah, Sienna, I see you've met our new antique expert. Eloise and I go way back, don't we, darling?" The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sienna's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing with something that looked suspiciously like jealousy. "Is that so?" she said, her voice carefully controlled. I wanted to explain, to tell Sienna that there was nothing between Angela and me anymore. But with Angela standing right there, her smug smile growing wider by the second, I couldn't find the words. The next few hours were excruciating. I tried to focus on the antiques, but I was acutely aware of Sienna's presence, of the hurt and confusion radiating off her in waves. Angela, for her part, seemed to delight in the tension, making pointed comments about our shared past and brushing against me accidentally whenever Sienna was in sight. By the time I left the mansion, I felt emotionally drained. As I walked to my car, I heard quick footsteps behind me. "Eloise, wait!" I turned to see Sienna jogging towards me, her blonde hair flying in the wind. When she reached me, she was slightly out of breath. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have told you about my family sooner." I sighed, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on me. "It's okay, Sienna. I understand why you didn't." She reached out, her fingers brushing against mine. "Can we talk, really talk? There's a little cafe down the street." I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. As we walked to the cafe, our hands found each other, fingers intertwining. It felt right, despite everything. Over steaming mugs of coffee, Sienna and I laid our cards on the table. She told me about growing up in the shadow of Walsh Industries, about her desire to make her own way in the world. I shared my history with Angela, the good and the bad. As we talked, I felt the knot in my chest begin to loosen. Sienna's honesty, her vulnerability, reminded me of why I'd fallen for her in the first place. "I don't agree with what my family's doing," Sienna admitted, her voice low. "These historic buildings, they're the heart of Portland. We can't just tear them down for some glossy offices." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "Then help me stop them," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Together, maybe we can find a way to preserve these buildings, these artifacts." Sienna's eyes lit up, that spark of passion I loved so much returning. "You mean it? You still want to be with me even after all this?" In response, I leaned across the table and kissed her. It was a soft, sweet kiss, full of promise and forgiveness. When we pulled apart, Sienna was smiling, her blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. As we left the cafe hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. We still had Angela to deal with, not to mention the rest of the Walsh family. But with Sienna by my side, I felt ready to take on whatever challenges came our way. Little did I know, the biggest challenges were yet to come. The web of deceit and hidden agendas ran deeper than either of us could have imagined, and our commitment to each other, and to preserving Portland's history, would be tested in ways we never expected. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. By day, I continued my evaluation of the Walsh Mansion's antiques, meticulously cataloging each piece. By night, Sienna and I pored over city records and preservation laws, looking for any loophole that might help us save Portland's historic buildings from her family's modernization plans. It was during one of these late-night research sessions that I first noticed something odd. I was examining a particularly valuable Tiffany lamp from the Walsh collection, when a detail caught my eye. The signature on the base didn't quite match the authenticated Tiffany pieces I'd seen before. "Sienna," I called out, my voice tight with concern. "Can you come look at this?" She crossed the room, her brow furrowed. "What is it, Eloise?" I pointed out the discrepancy, explaining my suspicions. Sienna's face paled as she examined the lamp. "Gosh, you don't think." I didn't want to say it, but the possibility was there, hanging in the air between us. Could some of the Walsh family's prized antiques be forgeries? As the days went on, I found more inconsistencies. A supposedly 18th century writing desk with modern screws hidden beneath its ornate carvings, a priceless Ming vase with telltale signs of recent manufacturing. Each discovery felt like a punch to the gut. I was conflicted about what to do. On one hand, exposing the fraud could potentially halt the Walsh family's plans to demolish the historic buildings. On the other, it would devastate Sienna and potentially ruin her family's reputation. My internal struggle was interrupted one evening by a call from Angela. "Eloise, darling," her silky voice purred through the phone. "I need you to come to the office tonight. There are some details we need to discuss about your evaluation." The tone of her voice sent a shiver down my spine. Did she know I'd discovered the forgeries? I agreed to meet her, my mind racing with possibilities. The Walsh Industries office was eerily quiet when I arrived. Angela was waiting for me in her corner office, a glass of whiskey in her hand. "Ah, Eloise," she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Always so punctual." I cut straight to the chase. "What's this about, Angela?" She circled her desk, coming to stand uncomfortably close to me. "I've noticed you've been thorough in your evaluation, perhaps too thorough." My heart raced, but I kept my face neutral. "I'm just doing the job you hired me for." Angela laughed, a harsh sound in the quiet office. "Oh, darling, we both know there's more to it than that. You've been spending an awful lot of time with young Sienna, haven't you?" I felt a flash of anger at her insinuation. "My personal life is none of your business, Angela." "It is when it interferes with my plans," she snapped, her composure slipping for a moment. Then, just as quickly, her smooth facade was back in place. She reached out, running a finger along my jawline. "You know, Eloise, things could be so much easier if you just cooperated." I jerked away from her touch. "What are you suggesting?" Angela's smile was predatory. "Join me, Eloise. With your expertise and my connections, we could make a fortune. Who cares if a few old buildings get torn down in the process?" I was speechless. Was she really proposing what I thought she was? "Think about it," Angela continued, moving closer again. "We were good together once. We could be again." Before I could react, she leaned in and kissed me. For a split second, I was transported back to our past, remembering the passion we once shared. But then reality came crashing back, and I pushed her away. "No, Angela," I said firmly. "Whatever we had is in the past. I'm with Sienna now, and I won't betray her or my principles." Angela's eyes hardened. "You're making a mistake, Eloise. I could make things very difficult for you." As I turned to leave, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. There, standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes, was Sienna. My heart sank as I realized what she must have seen. "Sienna, wait!" I called out, but she was already running down the hallway. I chased after her, leaving a smirking Angela behind. I caught up to Sienna in the parking lot, grabbing her arm gently. "Sienna, please. It's not what you think." She whirled around, her blue eyes flashing with hurt and anger. "Really? Because it looked like you were kissing my boss, your ex." "She kissed me," I explained desperately. I pushed her away. Sienna, you have to believe me. I would never betray you like that. Sienna's anger seemed to deflate, replaced by a deep sadness. I want to believe you, Eloise, but this whole situation, it's just so messed up. I took her hands in mine, willing her to understand. I know it is, but we can figure this out together. There's so much more going on here than you know. She looked at me quizzically. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. This wasn't how I wanted to tell her, but I had no choice now. Some of the antiques in your family's collection, I think they might be forgeries. Sienna's eyes widened in shock. What? That's impossible. I wish it were, I said softly, but I found evidence. I think Angela might be involved somehow. Sienna was quiet for a long moment, processing this new information. Finally, she squeezed my hands. Okay. Let's go somewhere and talk, really talk. As we drove away from Walsh Industries, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. I was grateful for the chance to explain, to clear the air with Sienna, but I also knew that by voicing my suspicions about the forgeries, I'd set us on a path that could change everything. What I didn't realize then was just how dangerous that path would become. The web of lies and deceit we were about to uncover went far deeper than either of us could have imagined, and it would test not only our relationship but our very integrity. As we pulled up to my small apartment, ready to dive into the truth no matter how ugly it might be, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something much bigger than ourselves. Little did I know, our real trials were only just beginning. The following days were a blur of tension and revelations. Sienna and I spent hours poring over the evidence I'd gathered, her face growing more troubled with each forged antique we uncovered. The betrayal ran deep, shaking the very foundation of her family legacy. I can't believe this, Sienna whispered, her blue eyes clouded with disbelief as she examined a supposedly 19th century cameo that was clearly a modern reproduction. How could they do this? How long has this been going on? I wished I had answers for her, but the truth was, we were both fumbling in the dark. The more we dug, the more complex the web of deceit became. It wasn't just about the antiques anymore, it was about the very soul of Portland. As we worked to unravel the mystery, the city around us buzzed with growing controversy. Word had leaked about Walsh Industries' plans to demolish several historic buildings, and the preservation community was up in arms. Protests were organized, petitions circulated, and heated debates filled local coffee shops and bars. It all came to a head at a city council meeting, where the Walsh development plans were to be presented. The small council chamber was packed to the brim, with tensions running high on both sides. I sat near the back, my heart pounding as I watched Sienna take her place at the podium, representing her family's interests. She looked stunning, her blonde hair pulled back in a professional bun, her tailored suit exuding confidence. But I could see the conflict in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she gripped the edges of the podium. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, Sienna began, her voice steady despite her nerves. I stand before you today to present Walsh Industries' vision for a revitalized downtown Portland. As she spoke, outlining plans for sleek office towers and modern amenities, I could feel the room's energy shift. Murmurs of discontent rippled through the crowd, growing louder with each proposed demolition. Suddenly, a voice cut through the noise. And what about our history, our heritage? I turned to see an elderly woman standing, her eyes flashing with indignation. These buildings you want to tear down, they're not just bricks and mortar. They're the heart and soul of our city. A chorus of agreement rose from the crowd. Sienna faltered for a moment, her composure slipping. Our eyes met across the room, and I could see the turmoil written plainly on her face. In that moment, something shifted. Sienna straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and did something I never expected. You're right, she said, her voice ringing out clear and strong. The room fell silent in shock. These buildings are more than just real estate. They're our shared history, our collective memory. And I can't in good conscience advocate for their destruction. Gasps and whispers filled the chamber. From the corner of my eye, I saw Angela rise from her seat, her face a mask of fury. But Sienna wasn't finished. There's something else you all need to know, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. It's come to my attention that there may be irregularities in some of the antiques owned by Walsh Industries. Irregularities that could constitute fraud. The room erupted into chaos. Council members shouted questions, journalists scribbled furiously in their notepads, and in the midst of it all, Sienna stood firm, her eyes locked with mine. As security began to clear the chamber, I fought my way through the crowd towards Sienna. Angela got there first, her voice low and menacing as she gripped Sienna's arm. "You little fool," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I pushed between them, my protective instincts flaring. "Back off, Angela," I warned, my voice steely. She turned her venomous gaze on me. "This is your doing, isn't it? You've poisoned her against her own family." "No," Sienna interjected, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Eloise showed me the truth, something you've been hiding for far too long." Angela's face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this, both of you," she spat before storming off, leaving us in the eye of the storm she'd no doubt unleash. As we left the council chamber, reporters swarmed around us, shouting questions and thrusting microphones in our faces. Sienna gripped my hand tightly as we pushed through the crowd, neither of us ready to say more until we'd had time to process what had just happened. We found refuge in a small park nearby, collapsing onto a bench as the adrenaline began to wear off. Sienna buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Hey," I said softly, wrapping an arm around her. "You did the right thing. You were incredibly brave in there." She looked up at me, her blue eyes swimming with tears. "My family is going to hate me. Gosh, I've probably just destroyed everything they've built." I cupped her face gently, wiping away a tear with my thumb. "You've given this city a chance to preserve its soul. That's worth more than any business empire." Sienna managed a watery smile, leaning into my touch. "I couldn't have done it without you, Eloise. You gave me the courage to stand up for what's right." As we sat there, the late afternoon sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. Pride in Sienna's bravery, fear for what the future might hold, and an overwhelming sense of love for the woman beside me. "Whatever happens next," I said, pulling her close, "we'll face it together." Sienna nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. "Together," she echoed. We both knew that the real battle was just beginning. Angela's threats hung in the air, a promise of retribution that sent a chill down my spine. The fraud investigation would likely uncover even more uncomfortable truths, and the future of Portland's historic district was still uncertain. But in that moment, with Sienna in my arms, and the knowledge that we'd taken a stand for what we believed in, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever storms were brewing on the horizon, we'd weather them side by side. As we walked hand in hand back to my shop, ready to face whatever came next, I couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. One that, despite its challenges, held the promise of a future brighter than anything we could have imagined when we first met at that vinyl festival, what felt like a lifetime ago. The fallout from Sienna's revelation at the city council meeting was swift and merciless. Within hours, the story had exploded across local news channels and social media. Walsh Industries' stock took a nosedive, and the vultures of the business world began to circle. I woke up the next morning to find my antique shop besieged by reporters, all clamoring for a statement about my involvement in uncovering the alleged fraud. I ignored their shouts, ducking inside and locking the door behind me. As I leaned against it, my phone buzzed with a message from Sienna. "My father wants to see us, both of us. Now." My stomach churned with anxiety as I made my way to the Walsh family mansion. Sienna was waiting for me outside, her face pale and drawn. She reached for my hand as soon as I approached, clinging to it like a lifeline. "Are you ready for this?" I asked softly. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be." We walked into the lion's den together, hand in hand. The tension in the air was palpable as we entered Mr. Walsh's study. He sat behind an imposing mahogany desk, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Angela lounged in a corner, a smug smile playing on her lips. "Sit," Mr. Walsh commanded, his voice cold as ice. We obeyed, perching on the edge of our seats like naughty schoolchildren called to the principal's office. "Would you care to explain," Mr. Walsh began, his words measured and deliberate, "why my daughter has chosen to publicly accuse our family of fraud and jeopardize a multi-million-dollar development deal?" Sienna opened her mouth to speak, but I squeezed her hand, silently asking her to let me take the lead. "Sir," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I discovered inconsistencies in some of the antiques during my evaluation, pieces that are, quite frankly, forgeries." Mr. Walsh's eyes narrowed. And instead of bringing these concerns to me directly, you chose to air our dirty laundry in public? We didn't know who to trust, Sienna interjected. Dad, how long have you known about this? A flicker of something, guilt, regret, passed across Mr. Walsh's face before his stern expression returned. The antiques business has always been complicated, he said carefully. Sometimes, to close a deal, certain compromises are made. Compromises? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. You're talking about fraud on a massive scale. Angela pushed off from the wall, sauntering towards us. Oh, don't be so naive, Eloise. This is how business is done in the real world. Not that you'd know much about that, playing with your little trinkets in that dusty shop of yours. I felt Sienna tense beside me, ready to leap to my defense, but I placed a calming hand on her arm. This wasn't the time for a family squabble. Mr. Walsh, I said, turning back to Sienna's father, I understand that you've built an empire here, but at what cost? These historic buildings, these authentic antiques, they're part of Portland's soul. Once they're gone, we can never get them back. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. But then Angela stepped in, her voice dripping with venom. Oh, spare us the sentimental drivel. This city needs progress, not some romanticized version of the past. Mr. Walsh nodded, his resolve seemingly strengthened by Angela's words. I'm afraid I have to agree. Sienna, you've put us in an impossible position. Unless you retract your statement and publicly support our development plans, I'll have no choice but to cut you off. No more trust fund, no more family connections. You'll be on your own. Sienna gasped, her grip on my hand tightening. I could feel her trembling beside me, and my heart ached for her. This was the moment of truth, the crossroads where she'd have to choose between her family's legacy and her own integrity. Time seemed to stand still as we waited for Sienna's response. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. I'm sorry, Dad, but I can't do that. What we're doing is wrong, and I won't be a part of it anymore. Mr. Walsh's face hardened. Then I'm afraid you leave me no choice. Angela, please show them out. And Sienna, don't bother coming back until you've come to your senses. As we were ushered out of the mansion, I could feel the weight of what had just happened settling on Sienna's shoulders. Once we were alone in my car, she broke down, sobs racking her body. I held her close, murmuring words of comfort and support. What am I going to do? She whispered between sobs. I've lost everything. I pulled back slightly, looking into her tear-stained eyes. Not everything, I said firmly. You still have me, and your integrity. We'll figure this out together, I promise. As we drove back to my shop, my mind raced with possibilities. We had evidence of the fraud, but going public with it would destroy Sienna's family. There had to be another way, a solution that would save the historic buildings without completely burning bridges. Suddenly, an idea began to form. It was risky, potentially dangerous even, but it might just work. I glanced at Sienna, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep against the window, and made a silent vow. I would find a way to make this right, to give her back the family she loved while still protecting the city we both cherished. Little did I know, my plan would set in motion a chain of events that would test our relationship, our ethics, and our very safety. The storm we'd unleashed was far from over, and the eye was passing. The worst was yet to come. As I pulled up to my shop, I saw a figure lurking in the shadows. My heart raced as I recognized Angela's silhouette. What game was she playing now, and how far was she willing to go to protect the Walsh family secrets? I shook Sienna gently awake, my eyes never leaving the ominous figure by my shop. Sienna, wake up. I think we might have a problem. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion quickly replaced by fear as she followed my gaze. Oh gosh, she whispered. What do we do now? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever was to come. We face it head on, I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. Together. As we stepped out of the car, ready to confront Angela and whatever threats she brought with her, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something far bigger and more dangerous than we could have ever imagined. But with Sienna by my side, I felt ready to take on the world, or at least the corrupt underbelly of Portland's antique trade. As we approached my shop, Angela stepped out of the shadows, her smile as sharp as a knife's edge. Well, well, she purred. If it isn't the dynamic duo, how touching. I instinctively moved in front of Sienna, shielding her. What do you want, Angela? She laughed, a sound devoid of any real mirth. Oh, Eloise, always so protective. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here to make a deal. Sienna gripped my arm tightly. We're not interested in any deals with you, she spat. Angela's eyes narrowed. I think you'll want to hear this one, little Walsh. Unless, of course, you want your family's dirty laundry aired for all to see. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? With a theatrical flourish, Angela produced a USB drive from her pocket. This contains every sordid detail of the Walsh families, creative business practices, forged provenance documents, bribes, tax evasion, the works. One click, and it all goes public. I felt Sienna stiffen beside me. You're bluffing, she said, but her voice wavered. Angela's smile widened. Am I? Care to risk it? I knew we were treading on dangerous ground. What do you want? I asked, my voice low. It's simple, really, Angela replied. Sienna retracts her statement, publicly supports the development plans, and this little USB disappears. Oh, and you, my dear Eloise, keep your mouth shut about those pesky forgeries you've uncovered. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. I glanced at Sienna, saw the conflict raging in her eyes. We both knew what was at stake, not just the historic buildings, but her family's entire legacy. We need time to think, I said finally. Angela nodded, seemingly satisfied. You have 24 hours, choose wisely. With that, she sauntered off into the night, leaving us reeling in her wake. As soon as she was gone, Sienna collapsed against me, her body shaking. What are we going to do, Eloise? She whispered. I held her close, my mind racing. We'll figure it out, I promised, though I had no idea how. We spent the night in my apartment above the shop, tossing and turning as we weighed our options. By morning, we were exhausted but determined. We couldn't let Angela win, but we also couldn't destroy Sienna's family. There had to be another way. As the sun rose, casting a golden glow over Portland's skyline, an idea began to form. It was risky, potentially dangerous, but it might just work. Sienna, I said, sitting up abruptly. What if we could expose the fraud without implicating your family? She looked at me, confusion etched on her face. How? I explained my plan, watching as understanding dawned in her eyes. It would require careful maneuvering, a bit of luck, and a whole lot of courage. But if it worked, we could save the historic buildings and keep the Walsh family's reputation intact. Sienna listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It's crazy, she said, but it just might work. We spent the day putting our plan into motion. I reached out to my contacts in the antique world, calling in favors and piecing together the puzzle. Sienna, meanwhile, prepared to confront her family one last time. As evening fell, we found ourselves once again standing outside the Walsh mansion. This time, though, we weren't alone. A small army of preservationists, city officials, and respected antique dealers stood behind us, ready to back our play. Mr. Walsh opened the door, his face a mask of surprise and anger. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Sienna stepped forward, her chin held high. Dad, we need to talk, all of us. For the next few hours, the Walsh mansion became a battleground of words and wills. We laid out our evidence, not of the family's fraud, but of a larger conspiracy within the antique trade. We proposed a solution, a joint task force to root out the real culprits, with the Walsh family leading the charge for transparency and authenticity. It was a delicate dance, threading the needle between truth and diplomacy. More than once, I thought we'd lost them. But slowly, incrementally, we began to make headway. As dawn broke, casting its rosy glow through the windows of Mr. Walsh's study, we finally reached an agreement. The development plans would be revised to preserve the historic buildings. Walsh Industries would spearhead a new initiative for antique authentication and preservation. And the USB drive? Destroyed. Its contents never to see the light of day. As we left the mansion, exhausted but victorious, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We'd done it. We'd saved the buildings, protected Sienna's family, and maybe even changed the future of Portland's historic preservation efforts. Sienna turned to me, her blue eyes shining with a mixture of relief and admiration. I can't believe we pulled it off, she said, her voice filled with wonder. I smiled, pulling her close. We make a pretty good team, don't we? She laughed, a sound of pure joy that made my heart soar. "The best," she agreed, leaning in for a kiss. As we stood there, the morning sun warming our faces, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We'd faced our greatest challenge and come out stronger on the other side. Whatever the future held, I knew we could handle it together. But our victory celebration was short-lived. As we walked hand in hand down the street, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID made my blood run cold. It was Angela. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. Her voice came through, low and threatening. "You think you've won, don't you? But this isn't over, not by a long shot." Before I could respond, she hung up. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, a chill running down my spine. Sienna looked at me, concern etched on her face. "What is it? What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled over me. "It was Angela," I said quietly. She says it's not over." Sienna's grip on my hand tightened. "What do you think she means?" I shook my head, unsure. "I don't know, but I have a feeling we're about to find out." As we continued our walk, the jubilation of our victory faded, replaced by a growing sense of unease. We'd won the battle, but the war, it seemed, was far from over. Angela's threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, promising trouble on the horizon. But as I looked at Sienna, saw the determination in her eyes, I felt a surge of courage. Whatever Angela had planned, whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our love, tested by fire and strengthened by adversity, would see us through. Little did we know, the greatest test of all was yet to come. A test that would push us to our limits, challenge our ethics, and force us to confront the true cost of preserving the past while building a future together. The weeks following our confrontation with the Walsh family were a whirlwind of activity. Sienna and I threw ourselves into the new preservation initiative, working tirelessly to document and authenticate Portland's historic treasures. It was exhausting but exhilarating work, and I found myself falling even more in love with both the city and the woman by my side. But Angela's threat lingered in the back of my mind like a shadow, never quite disappearing no matter how bright things seemed. I tried to shake it off, to focus on the positive changes we were making, but I couldn't quite silence the nagging feeling that the other shoe was about to drop. It happened on a crisp autumn morning, as Sienna and I were setting up a pop-up authentication clinic in one of the historic buildings we'd helped save. The door burst open, and in strode Angela, flanked by two stern-looking men in suits. "Well, well," she drawled, her eyes glittering with malice. "If it isn't Portland's golden couple." I instinctively moved in front of Sienna, my heart racing. "What do you want, Angela?" She smiled, a predatory grin that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I want. Revenge." With a flick of her wrist, she produced a stack of documents. "You see, while you two were playing heroes, I was doing some digging of my own. And what I found, well, let's just say it's quite interesting." My blood ran cold as I realized what she must have uncovered. Years ago, before I'd gotten my life together, I'd made some mistakes. Mistakes that, if brought to light, could destroy everything Sienna and I had worked for. Angela's eyes gleamed with triumph as she saw the recognition on my face. "That's right, Eloise. I know all about your little indiscretions. The question is, does Sienna?" I turned to Sienna, my heart in my throat. Her face was a mask of confusion and concern. "Eloise, what is she talking about?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do. "Sienna, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." As I began to speak, laying bare the mistakes of my past, I watched the emotions play across Sienna's face. Shock, hurt, disappointment. Each one felt like a knife to my heart, but I kept talking, determined to get it all out in the open. When I finished, the room was silent. Angela stood there, practically vibrating with glee, while Sienna just stared at me, her blue eyes swimming with unshed tears. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. I reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "I was afraid," I admitted. "Afraid of losing you, of ruining everything we've built. I'm so sorry, Sienna. I never meant to hurt you." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, to my utter amazement, Sienna squeezed my hand and turned to face Angela. "Is that all you've got?" she asked, her voice steady and strong. Angela blinked, clearly thrown off balance. "What?" Sienna stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. You heard me. Is that all you've got? Because if it is, I think you should leave now. Angela sputtered, her composure cracking. But the forgeries, the fraud. Don't you care about what she did? Of course I care, Sienna replied. But I care more about who Eloise is now. The woman who stood up for what's right, who fought to save our city's history. The woman I love. I felt tears prick my eyes as Sienna's words washed over me. Despite everything, she still loved me. Still stood by me. Angela's face contorted with rage. You're both fools, she spat. I'll make sure everyone knows about this. I'll ruin you. But her threats fell flat in the face of our united front. As security escorted her and her cronies out, I turned to Sienna, my heart full of love and gratitude. I don't deserve you, I said softly. She smiled, reaching up to cup my face. You deserve happiness, Eloise. We both do, and I think we've found it together. As we kissed, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. We still had to deal with the fallout from Angela's revelations, and there were sure to be more challenges along the way. But I knew that as long as we faced them together, we could handle anything. In the months that followed, we weathered the storm of public opinion, using it as an opportunity to advocate for second chances and the power of redemption. Our authenticity and commitment to preserving Portland's heritage won over even our harshest critics. The Preservation Initiative flourished, breathing new life into the city's historic districts. My antique shop became a hub for education and authentication, with Sienna by my side every step of the way. We even started planning a series of workshops to teach young people about the value of history and craftsmanship. As for Angela, her attempts to discredit us backfired spectacularly. The more she tried to tear us down, the more support we gained. Eventually, she left town, her reputation in tatters. 1 year to the day after our confrontation with Angela, Sienna and I stood hand in hand on the roof of one of the historic buildings we'd helped save. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, casting a warm glow over the city we'd come to love even more deeply. You know, Sienna said, turning to face me with a mischievous glint in her eye, I think we forgot something important in all the chaos of the past year. I raised an eyebrow, curious. Oh, what's that? With a smile that took my breath away, she dropped to one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. Eloise Parker, will you marry me? Tears of joy sprang to my eyes as I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. As Sienna slipped the ring, a beautiful vintage piece, of course, onto my finger, I knew that this was just the beginning of our greatest adventure yet. We sealed our engagement with a kiss. The city spread out before us like a promise of all the tomorrows we'd face together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever storms we might weather, I knew that our love, born in the world of antiques and tempered by adversity, would stand the test of time. As we held each other close, watching the sun set on one chapter of our lives and rise on another, I couldn't help but think that sometimes. The most precious treasures aren't found in dusty antique shops or historic mansions. Sometimes, they're found in the heart of the person standing right beside you, ready to take on the world together.